Welcome to New Stripe City, a YouTube channel for diehard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie, and I'm here to talk about the Bengals losing to the Miami Dolphins. I haven't gone live for a while, so if you're new here, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. I had some technical difficulties with my streaming tool, but that's neither here nor there. Bengals end up losing this game to the Miami Dolphins, but there were a number of things that we could talk about from this game. The first thing is the most important thing, which is Joe Burrow, right? Obviously, this was Joe Burrow's debut. He only played 3 plays, so that was somewhat underwhelming considering the way that this offense kind of went out. So they lose 29-26. Joe Burrow comes out for his 3 plays, and obviously the biggest one that we have to talk about was the drop by Jamar Chase on the screen. So Jamar Chase comes out. He drops the screen pass. I don't know if it would be considered a fumble. I think it was just considered an incomplete pass. But obviously, Jamar Chase is still struggling with the drops. Not something that we wanted to see. Kind of botched that drive in a sense. And so the first play, I believe, before that was an end around to Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd was able to get a gain of, I believe, 2 yards on that. And then, not much really happened after that. And so outside of, and when I say not much happened after that, for Joe Burrow, nothing really much happened. And then Chase was also out. And then we got to see a lot of the matchups. So let's talk about some of the good things. Some of the good things that I'll say is the Bengals offensive line, once again, played a commendable game. They haven't shown any issues throughout this offseason. And throughout these preseason games, Jacquez Patrick had another good game, 10 carries for 43 yards and a touchdown. Travion Williams also had 9 carries for 44 yards. He also got to get a chance to play. Chris Evans scored a touchdown in this game at the receiving position. He continues to show what he can bring to the table, especially as a dynamic receiver as well as running back. And then we saw some things in the receiving game. Trent Taylor had 3 receptions in this game for 59 yards. Thad Moss definitely put on a show, 5 receptions for 44 yards, and he needed to do some things. Mitchell Wilcox had a big catch, a 21-yard catch as well. Trenton, for the guys that were watching my live chat, we call him Steve Irwin, definitely made his mark felt on this game. 2 big catches for 39 yards. Stanley Morgan also had a play. Jacquez Patrick also had 2 catches for 18 yards. So there were a lot of guys that made some plays here, but mostly a lot of people will be talking about the drop from Jamar Chase. Obviously, it was a continued storyline that kind of transferred over, and that's honestly something that they're going to have to figure out. As you guys know, I wasn't really worried too much about it the last game. This game, with it continuing, I'm not so sure. We'll have to talk about it. Darius Hodge, another guy that had a big game, ended up having a sack. Noah Spence also made his debut and also did some things. We also saw Ricardo Allen as well. But one of the things that I will say that kind of worried me in this game was that if you look at the corners, it was slightly concerning. I mean, to have a guy that was an undrafted college free agent just come in and kind of torch us, that was somewhat concerning. You talk about Reed Sinnett. He had 343 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I don't want to make too big of a deal of it because obviously the Bengals were putting in a lot of their second and third unit. Another thing that I'll say is my man Khalid Kareem, who I've been talking about is a sleeper coming into this season, also had a sack as well and definitely flashed some stuff there. We saw some things from Cam Sample as well. He also had a sack. So the Bengals edge rushers and D-line were definitely getting after them. And it definitely seems like they will have some decisions on their hands. The one thing that really stood out to me as well was just the depth. It was kind of surprising in some senses to see how many players that the Bengals were able to trot out there. And even with this being their second and third units, still were able to have some guys where you're still looking like, is this guy going to make the roster? Is this guy not going to make the roster? So that's the biggest thing that I took away from this. The Bengals second team offense definitely looked good. You also want to talk about Evan McPherson connecting on his field goal for 57 yards. So that was good to see. Austin Seibert also made a field goal from 36 yards. But I think it's fair to say that Evan McPherson is definitely taking this job, and we'll have to see where that goes. Not much really from the linebackers in this game. The one thing that really just stood out is how deep the Bengals are at running back. That was the biggest indicator, I think, at this game. You had Jaquez Patrick, you had Travion, who both played well, Chris Evans, Samaje Perine. Didn't really do much. Honestly, I think he played in like the first drive, but didn't really do much there. So we'll have to see how these things pan out. But for me, I think that I would probably say that Jaquez Patrick makes it just based off of what he's done in the past couple of games. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen there? There also was a injury scare. I don't know if it's really going to end up being a concern, but Deontay Smith was another guy who got hurt during the game, but seemed to be okay. Deontay Smith and Michael Jordan also got some run. They moved those guys around a bit. And, for the most part, the offensive line was fine. The defense was concerning. Defense was concerning. Early on, they really looked good. But as they started to get to the end of that roster, you started to see a lot of plays given up. The one thing I will say is I think that Kyle Shermer also had a good game, 18 of 27 for 206 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Allen bounced back a little bit, 5 for 9 for 87 yards. So Joe Burrow's official stat line, he was 0 for 1 for no yards. Obviously, that came because of the Jamar Chase drop. So we didn't get to see Joe Burrow that much. I was hoping that we'd get to see him a series. I can't fault the coaching staff for taking him out because, as we know, Joe Burrow is this team. He is the future. And, of course, they probably didn't want to play him that much, but he did get a good standing ovation from Houday Nation, so that was dope to see. And then outside of that, there wasn't much more other than that. So I think Trent Taylor, he had a spectacular game. I think Trenton Irwin had a spectacular game. Chris Evans, Jaquez Patrick, a lot of guys that I named. Scotty Washington also had a touchdown as well. So we'll see what happens, but I think the big narrative is obviously going to be the Jamar Chase factor. Where does he go from here? We'll have to see. I think that Chase will be fine, but it's right for people to question him because that's all we've seen is multiple consecutive drops. We'll have to see. It was some sort of screen pass, but there's no excuse for it at this point. The Bengals do have Auden Tate. If they need to bring Chase along a little slower, they do have that option to do that. And then you also talk about Mike Thomas also had 2 catches for 40 yards. So you saw a lot of guys really making plays and really fighting for a roster spot. And with the Bengals having 2 weeks to do this, it'll be interesting to see what this roster looks like on Tuesday. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But for me, I think some of the big winners in this game, just from looking at it, I'd probably definitely say Khalid Kareem. I'd say Cam Sample, obviously. I'd also say Darius Hodge. I wonder if they feel, because I feel like even though it doesn't look like he has a sack recorded, I think Noah Spence did some things out there rather well. You also talk about some of the other guys, the Trent Taylors. I also think I've talked about my man. I call him Steve Irwin, Trenton Irwin. I think that, those guys definitely went out and did some things. Thaddeus Moss, I think, did enough to separate himself from Mitchell Wilcox. I don't think that any of the other tight ends really stood out to me. Mason Schreck didn't do anything, in my opinion, to really make that stamp of approval. And I think Evan McPherson really put a bow on the kicking job. And I don't think it should have been a competition from the get-go. But I think with that 57-yard field goal, he pretty much sewed that up. So the Bengals ended up not going for the tie. They could have tied this game at the end of the game. They chose not to kick the field goal. I'm not mad at them because you probably want to get out of there healthy as possible, and make sure that you don't have any major injuries. So they ended up, just going for it there at the end. They could have tried to tie it up. They could have tried to take in the lead. But at the end of the day, it's a preseason game, and we'll see what happens. Also, another news tidbit is that Darius Phillips played on the outside for the majority of this game. I know if you watched me and Zim talk about this game going into it, we kind of said that if Trey Waynes is hurt, that would open the door for Darius Phillips to play on the outside. Now, I thought that Jalen Davis would be able to play on the inside. Jalen Davis kind of had a little bit of a quiet game, but maybe some of his practice and maybe some of the things that he's done already will allow him to be into it. I don't want to forget Trayvon Henderson. He also had a solid game as well. He had an interception in that game. He really was moving all over the place. And then we also had someone else, I think, that stuck out. His name escapes me right now, but there was someone else that stood out as well. But I think Trayvon Henderson definitely made a name for himself. Keandre Jones, I don't think played too well. I don't think that he played himself into a roster spot. So we'll have to see. But outside of that, the Cincinnati Bengals, I like what they showed. I enjoyed actually watching this game, actually more than some of the other ones. So we'll have to see how that goes. But as usual, I will leave you guys with a who day, all day, every day, and especially on Sunday. And please be sure to subscribe. We truly appreciate that. And please be sure to hit that like button because we are doing a jersey giveaway once we get to 15,000 subscribers. So please be sure to do that because we could hook you up with a jersey. And as usual, I am out. It's your boy Ace.